Since that day, my house had remained eerily quiet. The distance I felt from my parents, the shock of losing my brother Eric, and the vicious cycle of blaming myself led me to withdraw into my room. I don't know how long I lived like that. One day, my mom knocked on my door. She called out to me from the other side, almost shouting.
Mary, open the door. Let's talk.
I thought about ignoring her. But if I don't open the door now, I might never be able to properly talk with my mom or dad, and I might never leave this room. Suddenly afraid, I slowly opened the door to my room. With her gentle eyes, my mom looked straight at me. Pushed back by the determination in her gaze, I stepped back. I'm scared. It was the first time I had ever felt this way about my mom. Terrified by my mom's slow approach, I slipped past her and quickly ran into Eric's room. It was my first time entering since he was gone, and nothing had changed since he was alive. His presence lingered everywhere.
Mary.
I loved it when he called my name with a smile. But Eric wasn't there anymore. The realization hit me, and I collapsed, crying loudly. My mom watched me from behind as I cried. My parents sat down on either side of me as I sat there, and my dad quietly spoke.
Where should we start? First, could you read Eric's journal?
My dad handed me the journal Eric had left behind. I took it nervously. Then I slowly began to read it. My mom and dad were teary-eyed, but I was too stunned to react.
I knew we would have to tell you someday.
My dad murmured apologetically.
Hi, how was your day?
After finishing my exhausting shift and returning home, my mom greeted me.
You seem tired again today, Mary.
She made me my favorite decaf coffee. My dad had been awake earlier but decided to go to bed early for tomorrow. Of course. I looked at the clock and saw it was already past 11 p.m. Thank you, Mom. Seeing me drink the coffee, my mom headed to her bedroom as well. My name is Mary, and I'm 39 years old. There's a reason why I'm still living at home and not married at this age. I'm a surgeon at a general hospital located near the station. Sometimes I'm called in the middle of the night, and there are often times when I can't even go home. One of the reasons I haven't met a man who can support me in this demanding job. But that's not the only reason. When I turned 30, I started to feel self-conscious about living at home, so I considered living on my own, but my parents opposed it. You might think they are being overprotective, but that's not the case. I can't do any household chores at all. I'm terrible at cleaning, laundry, and cooking. Even though I want to do them, I just can't seem to get it right. My parents know this, so they oppose me living alone because they can see that my place would become a mess. Moreover, if I had moved out, I probably wouldn't be sitting here calmly drinking coffee. Instead, I'd likely be collapsing from exhaustion in a messy entryway. I'm really grateful. As I passed by my parents' room, I silently expressed my gratitude and sank into my fluffy bed. The next morning, when I woke up, I headed to the living room. I had taken the day off, so I shouldn't receive any calls except for emergencies. Still, you never know what might happen, so I always keep my phone with me. My parents were already up and had finished breakfast.
Good morning, Mary. You were home late last night. Are you okay?
My dad asked with gentle concern. I'm fine. I sat down next to him and glanced through the newspaper. Watching me, my dad murmured.
Has it really been 23 years since then?
I looked at the date on the newspaper. Exactly 23 years. I nodded with an awkward smile. After finishing breakfast, my mom, dad, and I got ready and got into the car. I'll drive. I haven't driven the car recently, so I want to get back in the groove. My dad intended to drive, but I said that and took the driver's seat. On the way there, the car was unnaturally quiet. No one tried to speak. I'm sure both my dad and mom were lost in their own thoughts. As I drove, I remembered many things too. When we arrived at the cemetery on a small hill, we silently started walking. We reached a particular grave. At last, my mom spoke.
Eric, we're doing well.
Hearing her words, my dad and I each silently spoke to him in our hearts. Eventually, we looked at each other. It's time to go. I spoke to my parents, who seemed like they would stand there until sunset if I didn't say anything. After watching them head towards the parking lot, I spoke to the grave. I'll be back, Eric. With that, we left the cemetery. We decided to grab a meal and went to a nearby restaurant. As I reached into my bag to take out my phone, I noticed something. It was something Eric had bought me when he was still alive after I asked for it. Holding it in my hand, I got lost in memories, and my dad spoke to me with concern. I'm fine. I was just remembering, I said with a smile. My parents are very kind to me. Even though I'm well into adulthood, they still worry about me. I can hardly remember a time when they were angry with me. But even more loving than my parents was my old brother, Eric. When I was little, he always held my hand, and that continued until I was too embarrassed and refused. Whenever I went out with my friends, he would constantly remind me to watch out for cars and not to follow strangers. I often thought he worried too much, but I was happy. I felt loved and cared for. And I loved Eric just as much. We got along so well that whenever I heard stories about my friends fighting with their siblings, I couldn't understand why they would fight. However, it was also true that I found it strange in a way. No matter how selfish I was, my parents and Eric would always listen and laugh. It wasn't until much later that I understood why they cherished me so much. When I entered high school, since it wasn't within walking distance, I had to start commuting by train, and Eric's level of concern seemed to intensify even more at that point.
Take this with you.
When Eric handed me a safety alarm so I could call for help if needed, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. I'm not a grade schooler. Besides, if this goes off on the train, it would just be a huge nuisance. Seeing me laugh, Eric looked a bit sad. I appreciated his concern for me, so I put the safety alarm in my bag. I'll keep it as a good luck charm since it carries your feelings, Eric. At that, Eric's expression relaxed into one of relief. Additionally, if I came home a little late, he would ask in detail where I was, with whom, and what I was doing. I was thinking about starting a part-time job once I got used to high school life, but I guess he'd never allow that. This was something that troubled me. One day, a friend I had made in the same class asked me if I had a cell phone. I had actually thought about starting a part-time job to get a cell phone, but there was the issue with Eric. At that time, most of the kids in my class had one, and it was essential for communication. How can I get one? While I was thinking about this, Eric casually said,
It's great that your social circle is expanding now that you're in high school, but it worries me not knowing where you are or what you're doing.
As soon as I heard those words, I had an idea. Well, how about you buy me a cell phone then? I wondered if it was too selfish, but I decided to take a chance. I had never asked Eric to buy me anything before. because I didn't like the idea of taking advantage of his kindness. I was even a bit surprised by my own words.
A cell phone?
Eric looked puzzled. Did I just make an unusual request for myself? Maybe I went too far with my selfishness. I felt a bit anxious. But just when I thought I shouldn't have asked, Eric said.
That's a great idea.
He didn't seem to notice my surprise and started getting excited about when to buy it and what model would be best. The next day off, after we talked about it, Eric and I went out to buy a cell phone right away. I was excited about getting something I wanted and the fun of going out with Eric for the first time in a while. Maybe I was too giddy or felt too safe because Eric was with me, but I think my attention was scattered that day. Normally, I have a habit of being aware of my surroundings while walking, but that day my field of vision seemed narrower. Even remembering this now, I know there's nothing I can do about it. On our way back after purchasing the cell phone, we came to a crosswalk. I was so engrossed in talking with Eric that I didn't notice the traffic light. Even though it was a red light, I stepped forward.
Watch out.
At that moment, Eric shouted and pulled my arm.
You really need to pay attention to the traffic light.
Eric was furious. Having never been scolded by Eric before and seeing him angry for the first time, I was too shocked to speak. Noticing my open-mouthed, stunned expression, Eric returned to his usual gentle tone.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to shout.
No, it's my fault for not watching the traffic light. Thanks, Eric. He must have spoken louder than he thought. Eric looked flustered but let out a big sigh as I turned to face him.
I'm sorry too.
Seeing Eric hunch over apologetically, I felt a warm sensation deep in my chest. My dear Eric, I'm not a child anymore. I need to become a sister who can stand shoulder to shoulder with him, not just someone he always worries about. I made up my mind. While I was thinking this, the signal turned green. Oh, it's green now. Let's go. I started walking. But before I could get across, something pushed me from behind. Ouch. I fell forward and slowly turned around to see Eric lying on the ground. What just happened? People around us were in a commotion. The driver of the car stopped near Eric looked shocked and didn't move. Eric, lying on the crosswalk, wasn't moving at all. In no time, the road became stained with blood, and people helped me to a safe place. Eric? I called out to him repeatedly, but he didn't seem to hear. Eric. I wanted to rush over to check on him, but my legs wouldn't move. Eric. As I cried out, someone was rubbing my back. My mind was in a panic, yet somehow the voices of others talking around me stuck in my ears.
That was incredible reflexes. He saved his sister, but
I don't want to hear that. I crouched on the road and screamed as loud as I could. Eventually, an ambulance arrived and Eric was taken away. Since I had also gotten injured when I fell, I went to the hospital with him. Even in the ambulance, I kept calling out to Eric, but he still didn't regain consciousness. Why did this happen? He was supposed to help me set up my cell phone when we got home. I was planning to message him every day so he wouldn't worry. He has to wake up or I won't forgive him. I clenched my fists and just prayed for Eric's safety. My injuries were minor, and by the time my treatment was finished, my mom and dad had arrived at the hospital. But something seemed off. Mom was crying hysterically, while Dad stared blankly into the distance. Dad, Mom. When she saw me, Mom hugged me while crying, and Dad placed his hand on both our shoulders. Of course, my kind parents couldn't bear the fact that Eric had an accident, but they don't need to be so down. He'll wake up soon. Just as I opened my mouth to say this, Dad spoke first.
It's good that at least you're safe, Mary. Eric did his best to protect you.
What is he talking about? I couldn't help but laugh. Dad, what are you saying? At least I'm safe? Of course, Eric will be okay, right? Mom started crying again. I could feel her arms trembling as she hugged me. Mom, you're crying too much. Eric will be fine. But neither Dad nor Mom responded. I don't know how long the three of us stayed like that, embracing each other. A woman approached us. She led us to a room where Eric lay on a bed, looking completely different. Since that day, our house became eerily quiet, and despite the lights being on, it felt dark. Maybe because they were worried about my depression, my parents didn't talk to me. But it was still so distant. I felt a distance that hadn't been there when Eric was alive, as if they were afraid of something. Gradually, I began to believe that Eric's death was my fault, and guilt consumed me. Caught in a vicious cycle of feeling distant from my parents, the shock of losing Eric, and continuously blaming myself, I withdrew into my room and stopped going to school. Day after day, I did nothing but cry as I recalled my memories with Eric. On my desk, the shopping bag from the phone store we had gone to that day with Eric lay abandoned. I don't know how long I lived like that. My mom would bring meals to my door every day, but I had no appetite and barely touched the food. Then one day, as usual, my mom knocked on my door.
Mary, I'm leaving your food here.
I didn't respond and just listened to her footsteps fade away. Soon, I should have heard her going down the stairs, but then her footsteps stopped and came back towards my room. They stopped in front of my door, and I heard her voice.
You can't go on like this.
Unusually, she was shouting.
Mary, open the door. Let's talk.
I thought about ignoring her, but she persistently kept calling to me and knocking on the door. If I missed this chance, it might really be over. If I don't open the door now, I might never be able to talk properly with my parents again, and I might never leave this room. Suddenly afraid, I slowly opened the door to my room. My mom, whom I saw for the first time in a while, looked pale and haggard. Her gentle eyes still looked straight at me. Pushed back by the determination in her gaze, I stepped back. I'm scared. It was the first time I had ever felt this way about my mom. Feeling a growing fear as she slowly approached, I slipped past her and fled my room. And I instinctively ran into Eric's room. It was my first time entering since he was gone, and nothing had changed since he was alive. The chair he always sat in, the TV connected to his game console, his suit hanging on the wall. On the day we talked about buying a cell phone, Eric had been sitting in that chair. We had spent many nights playing games together. I often came into this room under the pretext of studying, just to chat with him. The room still smelled like Eric, and memories flooded back. His presence lingered everywhere.
Mary.
I loved it when he called my name with a smile. But Eric wasn't there anymore. The realization hit me, and I collapsed, crying loudly. My mom watched me from behind as I cried. By the time I had stopped crying, it was already dark outside. My dad, who had returned from his work, and my mom, who had been watching over me, slowly approached. Exhausted from crying and having lost all my energy, I didn't even have the will to reject them. My parents sat down on either side of me, and my dad quietly spoke.
Actually, after Eric passed away, Mom and I came into this room once.
My dad's voice was as gentle as ever, and the coldness I had felt from him earlier was gone.
There was a journal in Eric's desk. After reading it, we realized we needed to face you properly. So we talked about it.
A journal. Did Eric write it? I had no idea he had written something like that. Holding my hand as I sat there in a daze, my mom began to speak.
Mary, I'm sorry. I've been so cold. You must have felt anxious and lonely. I'm really sorry.
She apologized over and over, and I didn't know how to respond.
Where should we start? First, could you read Eric's journal?
My dad handed me the journal Eric had left behind. I took it nervously. Then I slowly began to read it, unaware of the shocking truth it contained. A long time ago, there was a girl named Emily in this house. She was the daughter of my parents and Eric's blood-related sister. The journal started by describing how the four of them lived happily together as a family. Emily and Eric were very close, and Eric was very fond of her. One day, Eric and Emily went to the park together. It was just a 3-minute walk from our home. A park where elementary school-aged Eric always played with his friends. Although our parents were a bit worried, they let them go since it was a familiar park.
Be careful and don't be late coming back.
However, a few minutes later, Eric returned home alone. Noticing his pale face and inability to speak properly, my mom sensed something was wrong and rushed outside. On the way to the park, she saw a car stopped on the road. A man, likely the driver, was anxiously talking on the phone. When she went around to the front of the car, she found Emily lying there in a terrible state. I couldn't help but close the journal. Even though I had cried so much already, tears still streamed from my eyes. My mom silently rubbed my back, and after calming down a bit, I resumed reading the journal. After losing Emily, the family atmosphere drastically changed. My parents blamed themselves for letting the children go to the park alone. Eric felt guilty for being unable to do anything as he watched Emily get hit by the car. Eric's depression was the worst. He began refusing to go outside. It became difficult for him to attend school, and my parents, realizing that things couldn't go on like this, decided to adopt a child.
Do you think it was a rash decision? But it was the only thing we could do.
I remembered how I once asked my mom for a little brother or sister, but she gently refused. I later learned that my mom had undergone a hysterectomy. So far, the journal hadn't mentioned me. There were no new children that could be born from my mom, so they chose to adopt. As I continued reading, my heart pounded with nervous anticipation, unaware that even more shocking revelations awaited me. The child they adopted was a baby girl named Mary. What, me? Both my parents were teary-eyed, but I was too stunned to speak. I was adopted?
I always knew we'd have to tell you one day.
My dad murmured apologetically. The journal went on to describe how Eric gradually regained his spirit and how my presence had saved not just him but also my parents. The last line expressed his determination to protect this beloved family. After finishing the journal, I took a deep breath. It was hard to believe that I was adopted, but even more devastating was the fact that my parents had lost both of their biological children in accidents. That realization was overwhelming. And then I began to understand why I had always been treated with such extraordinary care. After a long silence, my dad spoke.
As the journal said, Eric gave his life to protect you, Mary.
The small life he couldn't save that day. Did he protect my life to ensure he never repeated the same mistake, even though we weren't related by blood? Tears welled up in my eyes again. Even so, Dad and Mom, you've been so distant to me. As if she understood my silent sobs, my mom spoke to me next.
Mary, Dad and I love you. It's not that we don't.
My dad nodded repeatedly.
After losing 2 children, we were terrified of losing you too.
I couldn't understand the feelings of parents who had lost children they loved. But the deeper the love, the greater the pain must be.
We love you so much, Mary, and you mean the world to us. Please understand that.
Listening to them, I realized their fear of losing me had overshadowed their ability to show their love, leaving them unsure of how to act. You should have told me that, I shouted emotionally. After Eric was gone, you both seemed so distant. I poured out all the feelings I had kept bottled up. I was so lonely. Blaming myself for Eric's death was painful. Their distant attitude made me feel anxious, lonely, and sad. My mom hugged me as I poured out everything. Then my dad embraced both of us. The 3 of us held each other and continued to cry. Eventually, when we all lifted our heads, my mom spoke.
Mary, we may not be the most reliable parents, but could we try again as an irreplaceable family?
I squeezed my mom's hand and nodded firmly. To me, you both are my real family.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We looked at each other, and feeling a bit embarrassed, I made a request to my mom. After all that crying, I'm hungry. Mom, can you make some food? I'll help. And so, for the first time in a long while, we sat around the dining table as a family. Later, I got ready to go back to school. I checked my uniform, my hair, and my belongings multiple times to make sure everything was in order. Then, I put the cell phone on my desk into my bag. The cell phone that Eric bought me had a strap he got for me on the same day. Eric and I had picked it out together at a shop. It sparkled, as if lighting up my future. I had breakfast and put on my shoes. Suddenly, a wave of anxiety washed over me, and I turned to look at my parents who were watching over me. It had been 2 months since I stopped going to school. Can I fit in with my class now? Sensing my anxiety, my parents each took one of my hands. It's okay. I have a place to come back to. I have my family waiting for me. With determination, I stepped outside.
I never imagined you would become such a wonderful doctor.
Even though you can't do any cleaning or cooking.
As we ate, the time passed peacefully. I became a doctor because I wanted to save as many accident victims as possible, like Eric. After returning to school, I studied tirelessly and finally got accepted into medical school. Of course, there were many twists and turns. But the presence of Eric, who lives on in my parents' and my hearts, supported me countless times. The next morning, I packed my usual work tools into my bag and put on my shoes. When I opened my bag to check if I had forgotten anything, the sparkling strap caught my eye. I've cherished it and used it since that day. The treasure I bought with Eric. Even today, it feels like he's pushing me forward. I put on my shoes and looked back at the house. Then, in a loud voice, I said, I'm off. I felt like I heard Eric's voice along with my parents' voices.
Have a good day.